The streets were cold. The air smelled of smoke, metal, and something rotten. The sky above was a dull shade of gray, covered in thick clouds that hid the stars. Neon lights flickered on and off, casting strange shadows on the ground. A woman walked alone, her body weak, her steps unsteady. Her clothes were torn, barely covering her thin frame. Her skin, a pale shade of blue, glowed faintly under the streetlights. She was not human. She was an alien, one of the many who had come to Earth long ago, seeking refuge. But Earth had not been kind to her. Her stomach growled loudly, a painful reminder that she had not eaten in days. She tightened her arms around herself, trying to fight the hunger. The humans who passed by didn't even look at her. To them, she was just another worthless outsider. She turned into a dark alley, hoping to find something, anything, that could keep her alive for one more night. There in the corner stood a large metal trash bin. The smell made her stomach churn, but desperation was stronger than disgust. She reached inside, her fingers trembling as she searched through rotten food and broken things. A half-eaten sandwich, moldy and cold. A bruised apple. She didn't care. She grabbed them, stuffing the food into her mouth, chewing quickly. As she swallowed, her fingers touched something cold and smooth. Not food. Something hard, small, round. She pulled it out and held it under the dim light. It was a ring. Golden, with strange symbols carved into its surface. The metal felt warm against her skin, almost alive. She turned it over, noticing a small mark on the inside. A name, perhaps. It was written in human language, but she couldn't read it. "Where did you get that?" A deep voice came from behind her. She froze. Her heart pounded. Slowly, she turned her head. A tall man in a black coat stood at the alley entrance. His face was partly hidden by shadows, but she could see his eyes. Sharp, focused, filled with something she couldn't understand. She took a step back, clutching the ring tightly. I found it," she whispered, her voice barely audible. The man took a step closer. "In the trash." His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous about it. She nodded. His eyes moved from her face to the ring in her hand. For a moment, he just stared at it. Then, without warning, he reached out and grabbed her wrist. She gasped, struggling to pull away, but his grip was strong. "That ring," he said slowly, his voice unreadable, "does not belong in the trash." She felt her heart racing. Was he angry? Did she steal something important? Would he call the police? "I didn't know," she whispered. "I was just looking for food." The man didn't reply. He was still staring at the ring. His fingers tightened around her wrist, but then, just as suddenly, he let go. "You need to come with me," he said. She shook her head, stepping back. "No, I don't even know you." The man sighed. "If you stay here, you won't last another night." His gaze dropped to the bruises on her arms, the way her body trembled from hunger. "You're starving." She swallowed hard, looking at the ring again. Why did he care so much? What was so special about it? She looked back at the man. His eyes weren't cruel, but they weren't kind either. He wasn't offering help out of pity. There was something else. She should have run. She should have thrown the ring away and disappeared into the night. But she didn't. Because deep inside, she felt it. This was not just a ring. And this man was not just a stranger. Hesitating for only a moment, she slowly nodded. "All right," she whispered. "I'll go with you." The man turned and started walking. She followed, gripping the ring tightly. She had no idea that this single moment would change everything. The streets grew quieter as they walked, the neon lights flickering above them. The cold wind sent shivers down her spine, but she forced herself to keep moving. Every few steps, she glanced at the man walking ahead of her. His long black coat moved with the wind, his shoulders stiff, his posture unreadable. She clutched the ring tightly in her palm, feeling its strange warmth. Something about it unsettled her. It wasn't just an ordinary piece of jewelry. She could feel a faint pulse coming from it, like a heartbeat. "Where are we going?" she finally asked, her voice hoarse. The man didn't look back. "Somewhere safe." She almost laughed. Safe. There was no such place for her. She had learned it the hard way. Humans didn't want her in their cities, in their homes, not even in their trash. She had been chased, beaten, called names she didn't understand. Every day was a fight to survive. She stopped walking. "I don't trust you." The man sighed, finally turning to face her. "I don't expect you to." His eyes fell to the ring in her hand. "But you're holding something very important, and you have no idea what it is." She hesitated, glancing at the golden band. "It's just a ring." The man's lips twitched slightly, as if she had said something amusing. "No, it's not." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "That ring belonged to someone powerful, someone who's been looking for it for a long time." A chill ran down her spine. "Who?" Before he could answer, a loud noise echoed through the alley, a sharp metallic screech, followed by heavy footsteps. The man's expression hardened instantly. He grabbed her wrist and pulled her into the shadows. "They're already here." She opened her mouth to protest, but then she saw them. 3 figures emerged at the alley's entrance. Their bodies were wrapped in dark armor, their faces hidden beneath reflective helmets. They moved with precision, their heads scanning the area. One of them raised a device. It beeped loudly, then flashed red. "It's here," the figure said, voice distorted through the helmet. Her blood ran cold. They were looking for the ring. The man gripped her hand tightly. "Run." Her legs moved before she could think. She ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The man was beside her, moving fast, leading her through the twisting streets. Behind them, the armored figures shouted, their heavy boots pounding against the pavement. A bright blue light shot past her, hitting the wall beside her with a deafening blast. A warning shot. "They're shooting at us," she gasped. The man didn't slow down. "They won't miss next time." Her heart pounded. Who were these people? Why were they after the ring? And why did she suddenly feel like she had stepped into a war she didn't understand? The man turned sharply, pulling her into an abandoned building. They ran through the dusty halls, climbing a set of broken stairs. Finally, he stopped near a shattered window, breathing heavily. She collapsed against the wall, clutching her chest. What is happening?" The man pulled something from his coat, a sleek, silver weapon, and checked its charge. His expression was grim. "You need to listen to me. That ring isn't just valuable. It's dangerous. And the people chasing us, they'll do anything to get it." Her hand shook as she looked down at the ring again. "But why? What does it do?" The man hesitated. Then he looked her straight in the eyes. "It doesn't just belong to someone powerful. It chooses who is worthy." She blinked. "Chooses." Before he could explain, a loud crash shook the building. The armored figures had found them. The man raised his weapon. "Get ready to fight." She swallowed hard. Somehow, she knew her life was never going to be the same again. The floor trembled beneath them as another blast hit the building. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the air filled with the acrid scent of burning metal. The man pressed his back against the wall, gripping his weapon tightly. His breathing was steady, controlled, like someone who had been in this situation before. She, on the other hand, was struggling to keep herself from shaking. Her fingers clenched around the ring, its warmth pulsing against her palm. The weight of it felt heavier now, as if it understood the danger they were in. A voice echoed from below. "We know you're in there. There's no escape." She looked at the man, waiting for him to react, to come up with a plan. But his expression remained calm. He glanced at the shattered window, then at her. "Can you trust me?" She hesitated. "Why should I?" He smirked slightly, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "Because I'm the only one keeping you alive right now." That wasn't exactly comforting, but he had a point. She gave a quick nod. "What do we do?" His gaze shifted to the door. The heavy footsteps of their pursuers were getting closer. "We make them believe we're still here." She didn't have time to ask what he meant. He suddenly grabbed a piece of broken metal from the ground and tossed it across the room. It clattered loudly against the far wall, echoing through the empty building. Instantly, the footsteps below changed direction. The man grabbed her wrist. "Move!" They sprinted toward a side corridor, ducking into the shadows. Her heart pounded as they ran through the abandoned halls, dodging fallen beams and piles of debris. The building was crumbling, its skeletal remains barely holding together. A loud explosion shook the structure, and a wave of heat hit them from behind. The impact sent her stumbling forward, and she crashed against a rusted door. She winced but quickly pushed it open. Cold air rushed in as she found herself standing on a rusted fire escape. The city sprawled beneath her. The man appeared beside her. "We climbed down." She swallowed hard. "Are you insane? That thing is barely standing." He gave her a pointed look. "So is the building." As if to prove his point, another explosion rocked the structure. The walls groaned, and cracks spread across the ceiling. No time to argue. She gritted her teeth and climbed onto the fire escape. The metal creaked under her weight, but she forced herself to move. One step, then another. The man followed closely behind, his movements quick and practiced. Halfway down, a deafening crack split the air. She barely had time to react before the metal beneath her feet gave way. Her stomach lurched as she fell, arms flailing. A scream tore from her throat, but before she hit the ground, a strong hand grabbed her wrist. The man grunted, holding onto her with one arm while gripping the railing with the other. His jaw tightened, muscles straining as he tried to pull her up. "Hold on," he growled. She tried, but her fingers were slick with sweat. The ring pressed painfully into her palm as she clutched his wrist. Below them, the armored figures emerged from the building, scanning the area. One of them pointed upward. "There they are." The man's grip tightened. Time to let go. Her eyes widened. "What?" Before she could react, he loosened his hold and they dropped. She barely had time to process the fall before they landed on a canvas awning. The fabric ripped beneath their weight, breaking their momentum just enough before they crashed onto the pavement. Pain shot through her limbs, but she was alive. The man rolled to his feet, yanking her up. "Run." She didn't need to be told twice. They sprinted down the alley, dodging trash piles and broken crates. The city lights blurred around them, and the sound of boots pounding behind them sent fresh terror through her. As they turned a corner, the man suddenly grabbed her shoulder, pulling her into a dark doorway. She tried to catch her breath. "We can't keep running forever." He pressed a hand against the wall, revealing a hidden panel. The door slid open, revealing a dark tunnel. "We won't have to," he said, motioning for her to go inside. She hesitated but stepped through. The door slid shut behind them, plunging them into silence. She turned to face him, her breath still uneven. "Where are we?" He exhaled, his gaze flicking to the ring in her hand. "A place they'll never find us." She swallowed hard. The ring pulsed again, a steady, rhythmic beat. For the first time, she wondered if maybe, just maybe, she wasn't the one who had found the ring. Maybe the ring had found her. The tunnel was cold, the walls damp with moisture that dripped from the ceiling in slow, deliberate drops. The dim light from the man's wrist device cast eerie shadows, stretching across the narrow passage. The silence was almost suffocating, broken only by their footsteps and the distant hum of the city above. She tightened her grip on the ring, its warmth contrasting sharply with the chilled air around her. The rhythmic pulse she had felt earlier was stronger now, as if responding to something unseen. The man moved ahead, his movements confident, like someone who had walked these tunnels before. She followed cautiously, still unsure whether she could fully trust him. After several minutes of walking, she couldn't take it anymore. "Where are we going?" "To safety," he answered without looking back. "That's not an answer." He finally stopped, turning to face her, In the faint light, his face looked more tired than before, as if the weight of something heavy pressed on his shoulders. "Do you want to survive?" She frowned. "Of course I do." "Then stop questioning everything and keep moving." She clenched her jaw but said nothing. Arguing wouldn't get her anywhere. She wasn't used to taking orders, especially from a stranger. But right now, she didn't have many options. They walked in silence again, the tunnel stretching endlessly before them. Then, without warning, the man stopped. He raised a hand, signaling for her to be quiet. Her breath caught in her throat. A faint noise echoed through the tunnel. Something metallic scraping against stone. It was distant but getting closer. The man's eyes darkened. "They found us." Panic surged in her chest. "How?" "The ring." His voice was grim. "They're tracking it." She looked down at the glowing band around her fingers. It had felt like a blessing before, a strange twist of fate that led her here. But now it was a beacon, a target painted on her back. The noise grew louder. The unmistakable clank of armored boots reverberated through the tunnel, sending chills up her spine. The man grabbed her arm. "We need to move. Now." They ran. The tunnel twisted and turned, the walls narrowing in some places and expanding in others. The sound of pursuit was relentless, their pursuers moving with precision, unbothered by the darkness. She felt a sharp tug on her arm as the man pulled her through a hidden doorway. The walls shifted, and the entrance sealed behind them, plunging them into another passageway. This one was different. The air was thinner, and strange symbols lined the walls, glowing faintly like the stars above a forgotten world. She paused, her breath hitching. "What is this place?" The man didn't answer right away. He glanced at the markings, then at the ring in her hand. His expression was unreadable. Finally, he spoke. "A sanctuary, or a graveyard, depending on how this ends." Her fingers tightened around the ring. "I didn't ask for this." He let out a quiet laugh, void of humor. "Neither did I." The sound of metal against stone returned, this time closer. Their pursuers weren't stopping. The man cursed under his breath. "We have to keep moving." They sprinted down the corridor, past walls lined with symbols that seemed to hum as they passed. The air around them crackled with energy, making the hairs on her arms stand on end. Then suddenly, they reached a dead end. A massive, intricate door stood before them, covered in symbols she didn't recognize. Unlike the rest of the tunnel, this door seemed untouched by time. She turned to the man, her pulse racing. "Now what?" He exhaled, stepping closer. "Now we see if that ring is really meant for you." Her eyes widened. "What? How?" "Touch the door." She hesitated. The weight of the moment settled heavily on her shoulders. If she did this, there was no turning back. The pounding footsteps behind them grew louder. They were out of time. Taking a deep breath, she raised her hand and pressed the ring against the door. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the symbols ignited, their glow intensifying. The air around them vibrated, and a deep, resonating hum filled the space. The door shifted. A pulse of energy burst outward, sending both of them stumbling back as the door slowly began to open. The figures chasing them stopped abruptly, their weapons raised but unmoving. For the first time, there was hesitation in their stance. And then, from the darkness beyond the door, something moved. A shadow emerged, tall, ancient, and radiating a presence that sent shivers down her spine. The man's expression turned grim. "Well," he muttered, "that's new." Her fingers trembled as she looked at the ring. What had she just unlocked? The massive doors groaned as they continued to open, revealing a vast chamber bathed in an eerie bluish glow. The air inside was thick, charged with an energy she could feel buzzing against her skin. It smelled different too, old, untouched, as if time had frozen within these walls. She swallowed hard, stepping forward hesitantly. The man beside her kept his hand close to his weapon, his body tense, ready for whatever was waiting inside. And then she saw it. A colossal structure sat in the center of the chamber, a monument of metal and stone, covered in the same glowing symbols that lined the walls. It pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. She glanced down at the ring on her finger. It pulsed too, in perfect sync with the structure. The man exhaled sharply. I was afraid of this. Her stomach twisted. Afraid of what? He hesitated before answering. This isn't just some forgotten sanctuary. His voice was tight. It's a vault. A deep rumbling echoed through the chamber as if the very walls had heard his words. The symbols on the vault brightened, shifting in patterns she couldn't understand. She took a step back. What's inside? Something that was never meant to be found. Before she could react, the pursuers behind them finally moved. The leader, clad in sleek black armor, stepped into the chamber, weapon drawn, but not yet firing. His helmet obscured his face, but when he spoke, his voice carried a sense of authority that sent a chill down her spine. You don't know what you're playing with, he said, his gaze locked onto her. Give me the ring. Her fingers clenched instinctively. No. The man beside her took a step forward, his stance firm. You're too late. She's already activated it. The armored leader stiffened. For the first time, a trace of uncertainty flickered through his posture. His grip on his weapon tightened. You have no idea what you've done, he muttered. A sharp crack split through the air before anyone could respond. The vault began to open. A blinding light spilled out from the widening gap, illuminating the entire chamber with an unearthly glow. The ground beneath them trembled. The symbols on the walls flickered wildly, reacting to whatever force had just been released. And then, from within the vault, a figure emerged. Tall, ethereal, wrapped in flowing garments that shimmered like liquid metal. Its eyes glowed with the same pulsating energy as the ring on her finger. She couldn't move. She could barely breathe. The armored leader took a step back. He was afraid. The figure tilted its head, studying them with an expression that was neither human nor hostile, just ancient. Its gaze finally landed on her, and when it spoke, its voice resonated inside her mind rather than through the air. You have awakened me. Why? She struggled for words, her mind racing. She hadn't meant to awaken anything. She was just looking for food, for survival. But somehow, she had stumbled into something far bigger than herself. The man beside her spoke first. His voice was calm but respectful. We didn't come here to disturb you. We were just trying to escape. The glowing figure remained silent for a moment, then lifted a hand. The ring on her finger lifted off her skin, floating into the air before settling into the figure's palm. The vault trembled again. The symbols dimmed, their light fading into the walls. The figure turned back to her. Its expression softened, almost understanding. You seek to survive, it said. And yet you have done more than that. You have set something in motion. The armored leader suddenly moved, raising his weapon. No, she doesn't understand. You can't let her. The figure merely looked at him. A pulse of energy shot through the air, knocking the leader and his soldiers off their feet. Their weapons scattered across the floor as they groaned in pain. The figure turned back to her. You have a choice. She swallowed. A choice. Stay here and remain who you are, or follow the path you have unknowingly opened. Her heart pounded. She had spent her whole life just trying to survive, scraping by day after day, never expecting anything more. But now there was a path before her that she had never imagined. The man beside her was silent, watching her carefully. He wasn't telling her what to do. This choice was hers. The chamber was silent except for the lingering hum of energy in the air. The glowing figure remained still, waiting for her answer. The weight of the moment pressed down on her, making her heart hammer against her ribs. She had never been given a choice before. Not really. Her whole life had been about survival, about scraping by with whatever she could find. But now, standing before this ancient being, she was being offered something more. She took a deep breath. "I want to know what this means," she said finally, her voice steady despite the whirlwind inside her. "I want to understand why this ring brought me here." The being nodded, and in a flash, the ring shot back onto her finger, pulsing with renewed energy. The moment it settled, a flood of images slammed into her mind. Visions of a lost civilization, towering cities with shimmering towers that stretched into the sky, people, not human, but not entirely alien either, moving through streets made of light, and at the center of it all, a great catastrophe. Flashes of war, destruction, the sky turning black as something vast and unspeakable consumed their world. The ring was their last hope, a key meant to awaken their protector, the being that now stood before her. She gasped as the visions faded, her knees nearly buckling. The man beside her caught her arm, steadying her. "What did you see?" he asked. She swallowed hard. "A warning. Of a war. Something terrible happened here." She turned to the glowing figure. "Is it still out there? The thing that destroyed your world?" The figure didn't answer right away. When it finally spoke, its voice was softer this time. It was never destroyed. It was merely delayed. A cold shiver ran down her spine. Delayed? The ring was meant to be found by the one who could awaken me when the time was right, when the danger would return. Her breath caught in her throat. "You're saying it's coming back." The being inclined its head. The man swore under his breath. "So that's why they wanted the ring," he muttered. "They weren't just after power. They were trying to stop this from happening." A deep, distant rumble shook the floor beneath them. Dust rained from the high ceiling. The symbols on the walls flickered erratically, as if warning them of something approaching. The armored leader, still recovering from the energy blast, pushed himself onto his knees. His helmet was cracked, revealing part of his face, eyes wide with desperation. "You've doomed us all," he rasped. Another rumble, this one closer. The air grew thick, charged. The being turned toward the entrance. Its glowing eyes narrowed. "It has awakened." Her blood ran cold. The man beside her tensed, gripping his weapon tighter. A new sound filled the chamber, low, guttural, and unnatural. It was not the sound of machinery, nor the footsteps of soldiers. It was something alive. The armored leader pushed himself up fully now, his face pale. "You don't understand," he said, his voice frantic. "We weren't trying to steal the ring to control it. We were trying to keep it from being found. We were trying to stop this." She barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on the entrance. The shadows beyond it were moving. The figure in front of her stepped forward, raising one shimmering hand. The symbols on the walls ignited, their glow turning a deep, dangerous red. "Prepare yourselves," it said. And then, from the darkness beyond, it emerged. A towering, nightmarish form, all shifting tendrils and jagged limbs, poured into the chamber. Its body seemed made of shadows, flickering and shifting like smoke, but its eyes burned with a hunger unlike anything she had ever seen. A hunger that had waited centuries to be unleashed. The air turned ice cold as the monstrous entity loomed at the entrance of the chamber. Its body pulsed with unnatural energy, shifting between solid and shadow, its jagged limbs scraping against the ancient walls. Its eyes, two burning voids, locked onto the glowing figure standing before it. A deep guttural sound rumbled through the air, vibrating the very foundation beneath their feet. It was not a growl. It was not a roar. It was something worse, a whisper that echoed inside their minds. The alien woman staggered back, clutching her head as an overwhelming wave of fear crashed over her. This thing, this entity, it wasn't just a creature. It was a hunger, a void. The armored leader gritted his teeth, forcing himself to stand despite his injuries. His soldiers, weakened but not yet broken, raised their weapons. The man beside the alien woman clenched his jaw. "Tell me we have a plan," he muttered. The glowing figure, the guardian, lifted its hand. The ring on the alien woman's finger pulsed with an intense light, and suddenly, The suffocating fear lifted, as if a barrier had been thrown up between them and the creature. "It feeds on fear, on weakness," the guardian said. "Do not give it what it wants." Easier said than done. The monster lunged. A blur of black and shifting limbs, it moved impossibly fast, tearing through the air like a living storm. The soldiers opened fire, their weapons blazing, but the energy blasts passed through its body, as if it were made of smoke. A cold hand of dread clenched around the alien woman's heart. If their weapons were useless, then how could they fight it? The guardian stepped forward, its glowing form intensifying. It raised both hands, and the walls of the chamber exploded with light. The ancient symbols carved into the stone came alive, blazing with golden fire. The creature reeled back, shrieking as the energy surged toward it, forcing it to retreat from the entrance. But it wasn't gone. Not yet. The monster shifted, coiling its dark tendrils, watching, waiting. Its hunger remained, but now there was something else in its burning eyes. Recognition. "You?" The word didn't come from its mouth. It invaded their minds, twisting through their thoughts. It was a voice ancient beyond reckoning. The guardian did not waver. "You were sealed away long ago. You should not be here." The monster's form twisted, flickering like a dying flame before solidifying once more. "Neither should you." The air cracked as the entity struck. Darkness lashed forward, colliding with the guardian's radiant energy. The chamber shook violently, sending cracks through the stone floor. The soldiers were thrown off their feet, weapons clattering uselessly. The alien woman barely managed to stay upright. Her breath came in ragged gasps, her pulse hammering. She looked down at her hand, at the ring that had started this all. It was glowing brighter than ever. A memory surfaced in her mind, not her own, but one the ring had given her. A time before the fall, a time when this same monster had been fought and defeated. The ring had been the key then. Could it be the key now? Gritting her teeth, she turned to the guardian. "Tell me what to do." The guardian's light flickered, strained under the weight of the entity's attack. Its voice was calm, but urgent. "You are the chosen one. The ring responds to your will. Use it." She stared at the band around her finger. "Use it." How? Another attack sent shards of stone raining down from above. The guardian staggered, its light dimming under the relentless assault. The entity was gaining ground. The alien woman clenched her fists. No, she would not let it win. Closing her eyes, she reached deep inside herself, past the fear, past the doubt. She focused on the ring, on the power humming beneath its surface. And then, she pushed. A blinding wave of energy erupted from her hand, slamming into the monster with the force of a collapsing star. The creature howled, its form splintering, twisting, unraveling. For the first time, it looked afraid. The guardian straightened, its energy restored. Now, the alien woman raised her hand again, pouring everything she had into the ring. Light flared, filling every corner of the chamber. The entity thrashed, clawing at the air, trying to escape. But it was too late. With a final, deafening scream, the monster was consumed by the light. And then, silence. The chamber was still. The air was heavy with the aftermath of the battle. The ancient symbols flickered one last time before dimming to a soft, steady glow. It was over. She gasped for breath, her knees nearly buckling. The man caught her before she could fall. The guardian turned to her, its gaze unreadable. "You have done what many could not. The darkness has been vanquished. For now." The weight of those last two words settled deep in her chest. For now. The war wasn't over. Not truly. But for the first time in her life, she wasn't just surviving. She was fighting.